The morning sky above the U.S. military base was quiet, almost too quiet. The sound of marching boots echoed across the courtyard as a new batch of young recruits lined up for inspection. Flags waved gently in the wind and everything looked disciplined, polished, perfect. But something unusual happened that morning. A black pickup truck stopped near the main gate. The guard on duty looked up, confused. Inside the truck sat an older man, his hands rough, his eyes sharp, yet tired. His hair was silver, but his posture was still firm, the kind that only years of service could build. He stepped out slowly, wearing a faded red flannel shirt, jeans, and worn-out boots. No uniform, no medals. Just a man with history written all over his face. The young guard walked toward him. "Sir, this is a restricted area," the guard said politely. "Can I help you with something?" The old man smiled slightly. "Just visiting," he replied. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone, something that made the guard hesitate. "Do you have clearance, sir?" the guard asked again, glancing at the security screen. The old man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the massive building ahead, the same one he had walked out of more than 20 years ago. His eyes reflected memories of smoke, chaos, and orders shouted through radio static. He finally said, "Tell your captain, an old soldier is here to see him." The guard hesitated, unsure what to do, but something about the man's confidence made him pick up the phone. Inside the base, Captain Miller was going through reports in his office. He was known for his strictness, sharp, disciplined, and young for his rank. When the call came through, he frowned. "An old soldier?" he repeated. "Name?" The guard's voice came through the radio. "He didn't give one, sir. Just said you'd want to meet him." Captain Miller sighed. "Fine. Bring him in." The old man walked through the hallway of the base, surrounded by young soldiers who whispered quietly. They didn't recognize him, but there was something about his walk. The quiet confidence, the way he scanned the walls, the insignias, the portraits of fallen heroes, as if he knew each one personally. When he entered the main hall, Captain Miller stood waiting. The room fell silent. "Good morning, sir," Miller said, studying the stranger. "You said you served here before?" The old man nodded. "A long time ago." Miller crossed his arms. "Mind telling me your name and rank?" The old man gave a small grin. "Names change, ranks fade, but call signs, they never die." Miller frowned slightly. "Call sign?" The man looked straight into the captain's eyes. "You wouldn't believe it even if I told you." The air in the room grew heavy. From the observation deck, a few officers watched curiously. "Who is that old guy?" one of them whispered. "Looks like he's been through hell." "Probably some washed-up vet trying to relive his glory days," another replied. But the base's admiral, sitting quietly in his office upstairs, heard the commotion. Something about the visitor's voice caught his attention through the intercom. He froze. That voice, it felt familiar. "Patch the feed to my screen," the admiral ordered. Back in the hall, Captain Miller tried to keep his composure. "If you served here, I'd like to verify it. What was your unit?" The old man looked around the hall, his eyes landing on a rusted metal plaque on the wall, a memorial listing soldiers from an old mission. Operation Iron Storm. He walked closer, his fingers brushing over a particular name. Captain James R. Cole. He whispered quietly, "We lost good men that night." Miller looked puzzled. "Wait, you knew Captain Cole?" The old man turned back slowly. "Knew him?" "I led him." Miller blinked, confused. "You led him? That would make you—" The man interrupted, his voice calm but commanding. "Back then, they called me Hammer 6. The words hit like thunder. The young soldiers who overheard went silent. The admiral watching through the monitor stood up suddenly, his eyes wide. He whispered to himself, "It can't be. Hammer 6 was lost in Iron Storm 20 years ago." The hall filled with a stunned silence. The air felt thick, heavy with disbelief. Miller's voice trembled slightly. "That's not possible. Hammer 6 is a legend. He never made it out alive." The old man just gave a small half-smile. "Reports can be wrong, Captain. Sometimes the war doesn't end. It just follows you home." Miller didn't know what to say. For a moment, even his military discipline faltered. The man standing before him wasn't just a veteran. He was a ghost from a story every soldier on that base had heard growing up. He'd been the commander who led a doomed mission, one that turned into one of the bloodiest operations in U.S. Special Forces history. Everyone thought he died saving his team, and yet, here he was. Outside, a few soldiers gathered near the window, whispering. "Did he just say Hammer 6? One asked. "No way. That's impossible." Inside, the admiral finally stepped out of his office, his steps firm. The soldiers immediately straightened as he entered the hall. His eyes locked on the old man. "That's enough chatter," he said. Everyone, dismissed. The soldiers left, though curiosity burned in their eyes. The Admiral stood in front of the old man. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, slowly, the Admiral raised his hand in salute. "Welcome home, Hammer 6, he said quietly. The old man nodded once, his eyes misty but proud. "Didn't think I'd ever hear that again," he murmured. But beneath the calm reunion, something darker lingered. The look in Hammer 6's eyes wasn't just nostalgia. It was warning. Something had brought him back to that base after all these years. Something unfinished, and whatever it was, the base was about to find out. The base had not been that silent in years. After the old man spoke those two words, Hammer 6, every corner of the command building seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers whispered his name like a ghost story. Some didn't believe it. Others swore they had heard the tales of his impossible mission. Inside the conference room, Captain Miller sat opposite the old man. The Admiral stood by the window, staring out, hands behind his back. "So," the Admiral said finally, his voice deep, calm, and cold. "You came back after 20 years. Why now?" Hammer 6 didn't answer right away. His gaze wandered to the table, tracing the edge of a folder that had the base's insignia stamped on it. The silence stretched long enough to make Miller shift in his seat. Finally, Hammer spoke. "I never left," he said quietly. "Not really," the Admiral turned. "Explain." Hammer took a deep breath. "Operation Iron Storm. You remember what happened?" "Everyone remembers," the Admiral replied. "A failed extraction. Entire unit lost, except—" He looked straight at him. "Except you." The old soldier nodded slowly. "That's what they told you. But the story you know isn't the full one." Miller leaned forward. "What do you mean, sir?" Hammer looked up at him, those eyes sharp and heavy with memory. "There was another team that night. One we were never supposed to meet. They weren't ours." The Admiral's expression hardened. "That operation was classified even to me." Hammer gave a dry chuckle. "Exactly. That's why I'm here." The tension in the room thickened. A storm was brewing. Not outside, but inside those four walls. Hammer 6 leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. His voice turned lower, almost a whisper. "We went in to rescue intel officers trapped behind enemy lines. But halfway through, the mission changed. Command redirected us. New orders, new coordinates. They said it was urgent." He paused, glancing toward the Admiral. "We never made it to the rescue site. Instead, we found something else. Something buried deep in that valley." Miller frowned. "What was it?" Hammer looked at him and said quietly, "You don't want to know." The young captain's heart pounded. There was something about the way the old man spoke, calm, steady, yet full of pain, that made his stomach twist. The Admiral crossed his arms. "If you're talking about classified intelligence, you should know you're still under oath, Commander." "Commander," Miller repeated under his breath. So it was true. The man really had once held one of the highest field ranks. Hammer didn't react to the Admiral's warning. Instead, he stared at the table, his eyes unfocused, lost in memory. "I watched my men disappear one by one," he said. "No bodies, no comms, just gone. When I tried to reach command, the line was dead. That's when I knew we were never meant to make it back." Miller's breath caught. "You mean it was a setup?" Hammer didn't answer, but his silence said enough. A knock came at the door. A young soldier entered, holding a tablet. "Sir, satellite records from Operation Iron Storm. You asked for them." The Admiral took the tablet, scrolling through. His eyes narrowed. "These files, they've been accessed recently." "Accessed?" Miller repeated. "By who?" The soldier swallowed hard. "We don't know, sir. The login is old, an inactive ID." Hammer's head turned sharply. "What ID?" The soldier hesitated, glancing at the Admiral, then said, "Codename, Raven 1. Glancing at the Admiral, then said, "Codename, Raven 1. The room went completely still. Hammer 6's knuckles tightened. His voice dropped, almost a growl. "Raven 1 was my second in command. And he died that night." The Admiral's face went pale. "You're saying someone's using his identity?" Hammer nodded slowly. "Or someone who never wanted him dead." The air felt colder now. Miller could feel goosebumps rise on his arms. "What are you suggesting, sir?" he asked. The old man looked at him, eyes sharp as steel. "I'm saying your base, right now, is being watched." Miller stood up abruptly. "That's impossible!" "We have top-tier security." Hammer raised his hand. "They said that 20 years ago, too." The Admiral slammed his palm on the table. "Enough! You disappear for 2 decades, return unannounced, and now claim the base is compromised? Why should I believe you?" Hammer leaned forward, his eyes fierce. "Because the same thing that killed my men is coming for yours." The Admiral froze. Miller felt the room tilt with tension. "Whatever it is," Hammer continued, "it's not over." Iron Storm was never a rescue mission. It was containment. And whatever we tried to contain, it's out. The Admiral's lips tightened. What do you mean by it? Hammer didn't answer. He reached into his jacket pocket and slid a small metal flash drive across the table. This, he said. Everything you need to know is on that. But if you open it on this network, you'll trigger a trace. Use an isolated system. Miller picked up the drive carefully. His hands trembled slightly. What's on it? He asked. Hammer looked at him, expression unreadable. Proof, he said softly. And names. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The base floodlights flickered as clouds swallowed the sun. Miller turned to the Admiral. Sir, should we call security? The Admiral held up a hand. No, not yet. He stared at Hammer. You said someone accessed old files. That means they're already inside our systems. Hammer nodded once. And they'll come for that drive. The Admiral sighed. Then we'll be ready for them. Hammer's gaze darkened. You won't be. Not unless you understand what you're dealing with. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the base. Red lights flashed. The intercom crackled to life. Security breach. Unauthorized signal detected in the server room. Miller spun toward the door. What the hell? Hammer was already standing. Too late, he said quietly. They're here. The Admiral barked orders into his radio. Lock down the compound. No one in or out. But Hammer didn't move. He just looked out the window as the first drops of rain hit the glass. His face was calm, almost resigned. He whispered to himself, It begins again. As soldiers ran through the hallways, the camera of the security feed flickered. For a brief second, on one of the monitors, a figure appeared, blurred, shadowed, wearing an old military insignia that hadn't been used in 20 years. The label beneath it read, Raven 1, active. Miller stared at the screen, his voice barely a whisper. Sir, that's impossible. Hammer's eyes narrowed. No, he said softly. It's just unfinished. The alarm continued to echo through the base like a heartbeat of panic. Red lights flashed across the hallways, and soldiers shouted orders, their boots striking the metal floors in rhythm. The whole base was on lockdown. Inside the command center, Captain Miller, Admiral Ross, and the old veteran, Hammer 6, stood before a large monitor, watching lines of code flash across the screen. Server breach confirmed, the tech officer shouted. Unknown signal source. It's inside our mainframe. Miller clenched his jaw. Shut it down manually. We tried, sir. It's overriding our system from the inside. Hammer's voice was calm but cold. That's not an attack. It's a trigger. The Admiral turned sharply. A trigger for what? Hammer stepped closer to the monitor, eyes narrowing as the text changed. A message appeared in white letters on the black screen. Welcome back, Hammer 6. Everyone froze. Who sent that? Miller demanded. The technician stammered. It came from an internal access point. South Wing, old storage sector. That section hasn't been used in years. Hammer's face hardened. That's where you keep the decommissioned archives, right? Yes, the Admiral replied. Old mission data, retired files. Not all of them, Hammer interrupted quietly. That's where Iron Storm was buried. Within minutes, a small unit was assembled. Miller, 2 armed guards, and Hammer leading the way. The corridors in the South Wing were dimly lit, filled with dust and the smell of metal. Why would someone hide here? Miller whispered. Hammer didn't answer. His eyes moved across the hall, scanning corners, his instincts sharp as ever. Every shadow looked like it held a secret. They reached the old archive door, a thick metal barrier sealed with an outdated access pad. Miller typed in a security override. The lock clicked open with a hiss. Inside, the room was cold and quiet. Rows of old computers and filing cabinets stood covered in layers of dust. Hammer stepped forward slowly. He seemed to know exactly where to go. He stopped near a rusted terminal and brushed away the dust. The small screen flickered to life, weak but still working. Miller watched him. You've been here before, haven't you? Hammer nodded. This is where they told us the mission ended, but it didn't. He inserted the flash drive into the terminal. The screen blinked. Lines of classified data began scrolling. Operation codes, coordinates, communication logs. Then a video file appeared. Hammer clicked it. The black screen faded into a grainy recording. Soldiers moving through a dark valley under heavy rain. Explosions lit the night. Voices shouted. The camera turned to reveal Hammer 6 himself, younger, shouting into his radio. Command, this is Hammer 6. Extraction point is compromised. We're surrounded! A voice replied over static. Negative, Hammer 6, abort mission. Do not engage. You're on your own. Hammer in the video froze. His eyes widened, not at the enemy, but at the voice. That voice belonged to someone he trusted. The Admiral's face turned pale. That voice. That's... Hammer stopped the video and looked at him coldly. You. The room fell dead silent. Miller stared at the Admiral. "Sir," Hammer spoke, his voice steady but filled with rage, "you gave that order. You left us there. My entire unit died because you called off extraction." The Admiral's lips trembled. "You don't understand, Commander. I didn't have a choice. It was a top-secret containment order. You were never supposed to find what was in that valley." Hammer took a step forward. "And what was it?" The Admiral exhaled slowly. "Proof of something that could destroy careers and nations. That operation was never about rescue. It was about covering up a weapon project that went wrong. A test that cost innocent lives." Miller looked horrified. "Sir, you're saying we killed our own men to hide it?" The Admiral closed his eyes. "To protect the country." Hammer's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You don't protect a country by killing your own soldiers. You protect it by facing the truth." Before the Admiral could answer, the lights flickered. The computer screen glitched. Another message appeared. "You should have stayed dead, Hammer 6. Then the lights went out completely. "Get the power back," Miller shouted. The emergency lights blinked on. The Admiral was gone. Miller spun around. "Where is he?" Hammer's voice was calm but grim. "He's going to erase the evidence. He'll try to destroy the servers." They ran out of the archive room, sprinting through the corridor. In the distance, an explosion rocked the base. Smoke filled the air. "Storage wing, it's on fire," a soldier yelled through the radio. Hammer's face hardened. "He's burning the past." They reached the control chamber. The Admiral stood near the main console, typing frantically. Flames licked the edges of the room. "Don't do it, Ross," Hammer shouted. "You'll destroy everything." The Admiral turned, sweat and fear on his face. "You don't understand. If this gets out, it'll tear the country apart." Hammer took a step forward. "Then let it. At least the truth will survive." Ross aimed a pistol at him. "I can't let that happen." Miller raised his weapon. "Sir, put it down!" For a moment, time froze. The flames, the sirens, the sound of soldiers yelling outside. The flames, the sirens, the sound of soldiers yelling outside. Then Hammer said softly, "You already killed me once, Admiral. Don't make the same mistake again." Ross hesitated. His finger trembled on the trigger. In that split second, the fire reached a gas line. The explosion shook the entire floor. The shockwave threw them all to the ground. The screen shattered, sparks flying. When the smoke cleared, Miller coughed, crawling toward the console. The Admiral lay motionless beside it. Hammer, burned and bleeding, pulled himself up. The flash drive lay near his hand, still intact. He looked at Miller. "Save it," he said weakly. Miller nodded, gripping the drive tightly. "We'll expose the truth." Hammer smiled faintly. "Make sure they remember the men, not the lies." Outside, medics rushed in as fire alarms blared. The base was chaos again. But this time, something deeper had changed. Hours later, the sun rose over the smoky horizon. Soldiers stood silently as an ambulance door closed. Inside, covered in a white sheet, lay the man they once thought was a ghost, Hammer 6. Miller watched as the vehicle drove away. In his hand, he still held the flash drive. He turned to the camera mounted on the wall, now repaired and blinking red. He knew someone was still watching. He whispered quietly, "Your move, Raven 1. The feed flickered. On a distant monitor somewhere far away, a shadowed figure smiled, the same insignia glinting on his shoulder. Rain fell softly over the base the next morning. The fire was out, but the air still smelled of smoke and burnt metal. Soldiers moved quietly, repairing what remained. No one spoke about the night before, but everyone felt it. Something deep had changed forever. Captain Miller stood near the flagpole, holding the small flash drive that had survived the explosion. Its metal surface was scratched and burnt, but it still held the truth Hammer 6 had died to protect. The Admiral's death had been reported as an accident. The higher command sent a message, no further questions. But Miller couldn't forget Hammer's last words. Make sure they remember the men, not the lies. He walked into the operations room, now half destroyed, and placed the flash drive into an isolated computer. The screen flickered to life, showing encrypted files, names, and videos, evidence of what truly happened in Operation Iron Storm. He hesitated. He knew that if he sent this data to the public, his career, maybe even his life, would end. But if he didn't, the truth would die with Hammer 6. He whispered softly, "For you, sir." With one click, the data uploaded to a secure server, programmed to release the files if anything happened to him. Hours later, Miller stood alone at the edge of the base's memorial field. Fresh rain washed over the names carved into the stone wall. He reached out, touching one name gently, Captain James R. Cole. He could almost hear Hammer's voice beside him, calm and steady. They were more than soldiers. They were brothers, Miller smiled faintly. They still are, sir. A soft wind blew across the field. Somewhere behind him, a radio crackled faintly. Static, then a faint voice. Hammer 6. Mission complete, Miller froze. The voice was old, rough, but familiar. He looked back. The radio was off. The signal light blinked once, then went dark. He didn't know if it was interference, memory, or something else. But in his heart, he knew what it meant. Hammer 6's mission wasn't just about war. It was about truth. About men who stood for something greater than orders. As the camera pans upward, the base stands silent beneath the gray sky. The flag flutters gently, half-mast. A single plaque rests beneath it, newly placed. In memory of Commander Jacob Hammer 6 Hayes, the man who chose truth over silence. Below it, a smaller engraving reads, "Legends don't die. They return when the world needs them again." The screen fades to black. A faint beep echoes. A new message appears on a hidden computer screen somewhere far away.